Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to competitive chess, like over-the-board tournaments, we are familiar with the formats. There are the standard formats of, just an open tournament and a certain amount of rounds, or there is a closed event, or a round robin, or a head-to-head match like the World Championship. It's very rare you get a unique event, and that is why Gibraltar's Battle of the Sexes is so much fun. It's an event that's usually held as part of the larger chess festival of Gibraltar, and it's kind of a side event, but this year, the Battle of the Sexes is a 10 versus 10 match between some interesting international and grandmasters all over the world. It's taking place, obviously, in Gibraltar. It's two teams of 10 and a reserve player. ELO about 23 to 2,500. So every round, 10 points are at stake. Everybody plays everybody. And in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the games. And yes, you see that correctly. Eric Rosen is participating on the men's team. And we are going to look at the first two rounds. And I'm going to take you through the games, and we're going to have a great time. Okay, I hope, And then at the end, we'll obviously talk about, the gender gap in chess and all that good stuff. So, the tournament begins, and Eric's opponent is named Marcel Efroimski. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Israel. And Eric, when I saw Eric Rosen play d6 in a Sicilian defense, I was shocked, because Eric Rosen does not play d6 in a Sicilian defense, ever. And his opponent obviously could have went for an open Sicilian, but chose instead to go for bishop b5 check. By the way, Eric definitely is going to be recapping his games. He has already recapped this one, so I'm not trying to steal his content, but I have to include him because Eric is here. And so he plays bishop d7, and Marcel employs a setup with c4, and then ultimately, d4, a setup known as the, kind of like the Maroczy bind. That's not how you say it, but that's how I say it. And white basically trades off a light-scored bishop, but tries to suffocate black with moves like f3, b3, just not allowing black to get standard counterplay. Black, in the meantime, is going to try to play either for d5, exploding the center, or b5, exploding the wing. And here Eric mentions in his recap that f3 is a slightly more accurate move order to set up, because the move castles allows black to very quickly target the queen side. Like, this move rook c8 just looks very strange, but it immediately goes after the kind of integrity of the Maroczy, and after b3 there's this incredible move b5. That move just doesn't look possible at all, but it is, because if cb5, this is under fire. If this knight takes on, wind, relax. Sorry, the wind is very loud. You probably can't hear that. You think I just yelled at nothing. That's okay. If knight takes b5, there's knight e4. And if this knight takes on b5, there is still knight e4, because there is this. So you see, white did not set up in the best way, and so leaves themselves open to some counter shots. And Eric takes over the initiative. And Marcel plays e5, trying to attack back in the center. And this creates a real kind of chaotic pawn structure in a couple of moves when there's a queen trade opportunity, and Eric forces it and is very, very close to what he would call a pawn cube, except this is a slightly enlarged pawn cube. It should be back there, but he is very close to getting it. Now, black is taking over this game, but obviously there is still plenty of fight to be had. The game is not over at all. And the reason black is taking over this game is because black is winning in the battle of dynamics. This knight on a3 is very, very poor. This knight on c3 could come under fire this way and can't really go forward. These pawns might avalanche down this way. a5, a4 to crack open the queen side at some point. Right, the position is maybe has better prospects for black. Is black better? Might be a little bit of a stretch. Let's see what happens. Knight a4, obviously trying to go knight b6. Rook c7, not preventing knight b6, but preventing knight b6 from doing any further damage. Now, at this point, Marcel is trying to take on the quest of putting all of her pieces on the a file. She is actually succeeding, and she is posing some relative problems here. Knight c5 is an idea. So what does Eric do? He moves the knight out of danger, counterattacking the bishop. The bishop rotates back. Knight attacks the bishop again. The bishop gets out of the way. Okay. Now, Eric should bring the rook that hasn't moved yet to control the open file. Eric brings the rook that hasn't moved yet to control the open file. Very well done. f3. Now, where do you move this knight? You attack the rook and continue building your initiative on this side of the board. Very nice. She counterattacks. And this is where the tactics start to occur. It's good for black to play this relatively ugly but effective move of defending the a6 pawn. Eric decides to go this way. Now, to the untrained eye, that is sacrificing the a-pawn. I think what Eric decided here is the a-pawn is a bit unnecessary to protect, because if you give it up, the A file opens, and the dynamics are still good for him. He's not wrong. So white plays rook d1, and now Eric could play rook c8, and now if knight takes a6, knight d4, and the pieces here are just not really that good, but that's really all it is. Black does have some vague threats, but it's really just a matter of those pieces are not really that good. And instead of that, we have knight d4. Now the problem is you lose this tempo, and it's not so, like, rook a7 there apparently was not the best move. Apparently black had to go this way. And that's a very tough move to play, because your rook doesn't really do anything there, visually. It's like, why is it's not, the whole point was to double up, right? So he plays rook a7, which obviously this was his entire idea. Turns out that the idea is not good. I've had moments like that. You guys know those moments in my recaps where I'm like, and here I realized. It's actually the king. The king for white is going to be the hero. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait, white has 3 pawns. Like, if black's counterplay is unsuccessful, white's got 3 pawns. White's going to win this game with those pawns. And so black plays f4. And now what does she do? She takes the knight. That was the biggest aggressor. And now we have a trade. And all Marcel has to do here is, like, not get checkmated somehow. So what does she do? She moves the king. The king is the hero. She is giving this man Eric rook odds. It's been 31 moves. She's winning this game without moving her rook. I love you, Eric. You're my friend. I'm just messing around. I just had a disaster of a tournament. I gotta tease someone. She's giving this man rook odds. How disrespectful. On a serious note, obviously, Eric made a calculated decision to sacrifice his a-pawn, and the Sicilian defense hangs on a knife's edge sometimes. He tries to finish the pawn cube, like right here, by the way, too. He could have had the pawn cube. He chooses to go out on his sword, and she backs up. And, this game is going to be won by consolidation and advancing of the pawns, and Eric resigns right here. Actually, he's a gangster. Only true gangsters make a move and resign. He doesn't resign on his move. He makes a move, makes his opponent go write the move down, and then resigns. A true gangster. So unsuccessful first round for Eric. Definitely a very interesting game, though. It happens. I have to show Eric first. He has the largest platform of anybody in the tournament. I'd also like to show you Irene. And Eric and Irene, good friends. They're also on this thumbnail because they're kind of the 2 most high-profile people. I mean, Irene obviously was a main character and the hero of the entire Dewa Kipas thing. But I mean, I know her. I've spoken to her through the whole ordeal, and yeah, I mean, if they obviously have the 2 largest platforms. She's responsible for a whole lot of chess now in Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken. So at some point they will play in this event. But these 2 have known each other. But I put them on the thumbnail because they're like the de facto captains, although they're not. They're not the captains. But anyway, blah 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 blah. Irene plays against Sabino Brunello, who actually is the official captain of the men's team. Strong Italian grandmaster, 2503. We have Indonesia, we have Israel, we have Italy, all eyes. And United States, Eric Rosen, right? So this game begins with a Rue Lopez, standard stuff, castles, bishop e7, rook e1, and we see black not castling and playing the Magnus Rue Lopez, but d6. So immediately committing the pawn to d6, no marshal. We're not going to be playing a marshal. And in this position, black has to decide where we are going to go. I mean, are we going to go for the knight a5, the keres with c5? Are we going to go knight back to b8 and d7, the Breyer? Are we going to play like a Chigorin style? Are we going to play the Zaitsev with rook e8, bishop f8? Are we going to play well, what are we going to play? We're going to play the Smyslov, apparently. h6 and bishop d7, rook e8, and bishop f8. This is known as the Smyslov school of the Rue Lopez. But around move 13-14, we start veering off course. So Brunello plays for b3 to obviously try to put his bishop on g7 and restrict this knight ever coming to f5. 1, 2, or both of those reasons. But Irene here plays b3. The point of b3 is that you control the knight's entry, and also you are going to find a different way to develop your bishop in the long run. And you're going to see her do just that. So bishop g7, queen d2, knight c6, and at some point in the Rui, something happens in the middle of the board. Because, by the way, I don't know if you've been paying attention, it's move 19, nothing's been traded, which is why beginners should not play Rue Lopez. Because what the hell is this? What are you, 800? You're going to navigate the complexity of a closed position? No! No, there should be a minimum test. You know, like before you get your driver's license, you have to take a test. On the road, written. Like, it's one of those things. You should not be playing this. Now, Irene decides right now she's going to open up the center of the board, DC, DC, Queen E3. Nice little idea here, kind of some permanent pressure. Apparently, black equalizes with the move bishop to E6. So apparently it goes from slightly more pleasant for white. I guess, you know, it doesn't... Machine doesn't like the fact that these bishops are so passive, but it's clear what Irena's doing, right? She's attacking the weak pawn. Now, perhaps black should go a little bit passive here with bishop f8, and that's exactly what Brunello does. That looks to me like the most natural move. This apparently is a free pawn, but you can take c5, and it's up to you to decide which pawn you want to part ways with. Queen goes back to a7, but now Irene takes over the game. Irene plays a very nice move here, and that move is bishop to d5. The bishop arrives in the middle of the board. There is a very direct threat, and any of the pieces that take this are going to lead to some problems for black. Also, there is a threat even beyond just the attack on the knight. It was taking it, because then e5 falls. And let me tell you something, at this level, being down a full pawn is a really big problem. So the threat is bishop d5. Brunello now has to do something very unpleasant, and that's allow this pawn to become a passer, protected, and open up some lines for the opponent. Now, Irene will win this game when this bishop gets free. Mark my words, okay? When this bishop gets free, gets back into the game, because right now it's a little bit passive, right? So she keeps pushing. Knight c6, knight e4. She's going to trade off the active knight. The active knight does not wish to be traded off. Instead, the pawn on c5 has been captured. Irene is now a pawn up. We have rook to d8. This knight is now joining the cavalry, either to b3 or to e4. f5, knight b3, no problem. And queen f3 hits the knight, right? Pawn to e4, queen g3. What did I tell you, folks? This game is going to be decided when white reactivates their bishop. This game is going to be... Uh-oh, that's not what you wanted to see. It's not even the best move, but just for the narrative of the game and my commentary, just believe that I said that, right? Bishop to c1. So, g5, d7, shoving the pawn forward. It can be taken, but now we jump in, and we have a problem. Who's going to guard this rook? Oh, no problem, I just moved the rook. Knight d6. Takes. Hello. All the pawns would fall apart. That would be a very, very unpleasant position. So black plays f4, but now we have this move. My queen hangs, but I take your rook to attack your queen, and Irene here finds a very nice tactic. Bishop takes f4. The point is that after it takes, she did not just lose a bishop for a pawn. She obviously had an idea. The idea is rook e4. She gets a second pawn. Black's pieces are paralyzed. She will maybe get a third pawn, or she's going to trade knights and win this. And she finishes it off by trading rooks in a slightly odd way and going for the weak pawn over there. She defends her queen side before taking the pawn on a6, and she's ever so slightly better, but it's kind of a nightmare position to defend. Like, black has to be passive. That's not very human to do, especially if your time is low. And on move 45, she plays a very nice a4. If pawn takes this, and if knight takes, then knight takes b5, two things hang, and black would resign. So a4, the final dagger in the Italian Grandmaster's heart. Not actually, she didn't kill him. On the chessboard. And Irene, with the help of some of her teammates, led the ladies to a 4-1 decisive margin of victory. There were draws, but there was 4-1, so they won the first round 6.5 to 3.5. The men looking to strike back in the second round after getting their souls sucked out of their body in the first round, but there's plenty of rounds to go. So, gentlemen, all right, never mind. We have player 2 has entered the arena, and his name, I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Gilan Bwalia. I don't know. I'm not going to lie. I never heard of him. Love his name, though. Gentleman from Zambia. So, 2410 international master from Zambia. Did not play in the first round. I guess they had the reserve play in place of him because, like I said, there's reserves. And Irene is our protagonist once again on the ladies' side. That's how you know it's going to be a decisive game, because unless a draw is like the craziest game ever, we obviously feature. Is Irene going to win 2 in a row, or is player 2 here, Gilan, going to get the win? So we have a Nimso Indian defense. Irene showing her repertoire with the black pieces. This is the second round. I don't know if I've said that already. I'm pretty sure I did. E3, castles, bishop d3, and kind of a mainline position. Now, here, the way white tries to get an advantage is taking on d5. White tries to take, black oftentimes will actually mirror image, and we will get a game that maybe looks like this. So for example, castles and even knight back to f6, and we just play against an isolated pawn. All right, white has an isolated pawn. Black will play bishop back to d6 sometimes, because this knight is obviously here to do this. But there's many ways that the game can develop. Gillen, God, I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I'm going to pronounce his name so many times in this video, instead castles and plays a3. And his inaccuracy here is that it allows black to trade in the center in a way where now you come back and you sort of wasted time with the move a3. So the difference in what I showed is that you haven't spent time on this move. Okay, so you might say, well, I don't know, Levy, I don't understand. I mean, the difference is marginal. No, the difference is pretty substantial. The bishop's positioning is actually very important. You'll notice that in the game, the bishop is on c4. And actually that, in and of itself, is a big difference, because the entire white game plan should be around some sort of attack. And right now that game plan doesn't exist. And, you know, he plays another waiting move. Okay, waiting moves by both sides. And you see what he's going for? He's still up to this, but he already put the bishop on c4. Slight detail, but black now immediately gets an opportunity to kind of break that isolated pawn situation. And obviously, if you take, well, why did you do that? Your queen is now just a huge liability. That's not very good at all. So he plays d5. Irene plays knight e7 and rotates the knight over to g6. And she's got a very solid formation. She's obviously not going to get checkmated. Bishop e3, bishop d7. Okay, bishop stand nice and pretty. There is no knight b5 here because the pawn covers. And if you play knight e4, after knight e4, black will play bishop to f5. So black is going to pin you, not really allow you to get away with anything in the middle. And what is your bishop doing? I don't really know. I'm happy I don't have to know. I'm happy I can just watch this game. So the bishop comes back to b3. But folks, you see what I'm saying? That little loss of time allowed black to consolidate in the opening. And after rook c8, rook e1, okay, we can bring our pieces. White is sort of without an obvious plan. An obvious plan. So white has to find something that keeps the game in the balance. Queen a5. But now bishop comes back to d2. Here, white could have actually gone for a slightly better thing with the intention of, you know, if you get pinned, you actually have knight f6 check. Which you don't have when the queen is back there, because the queen takes you. In this case, you take, and you're actually almost winning on the spot because of how weak these pawns are, and now the weakness of the black king. So you could have played knight e4. Instead, we have this, and now we have knight e4, but the difference here is that if you play knight to f6 check, gf6, queen f5... Oops. I yelled about that bishop like a minute ago, right? So the bishop is just the problem. It's just getting in the way of everybody. So that would be an issue. So we have a5. So we try to attack the queen, but now we have takes, queen d8. Irene's just staying solid. That light-squared bishop is still not doing anything. We need the light-squared bishop to do something. So here, the gentleman from Zambia, whose name I'm really scared to mispronounce for like a 5th time, plays rook g4. It's very clear he has bad intentions, right? But it's very clear that had he had those bad intentions early, the bishop would have stayed on this diagonal, right? So queen f6, bishop c3, knight f4. Okay, queen e4. Position actually looks very promising for white if white can just break through. But Irene uses her king's h-pawn to push the rook in front of the g-pawn. And now queen h6. And now you're not going to attack anybody. Rook e1. And now Irene's like, wait, dude, hello? f5? Who do you think you're attacking? I mean, you thought you were attacking me, but your rook is trapped. The rook just gets trapped in its attacking duties. Rook f3, e4, it's completely trapped. And again, this bozo never got an opportunity to participate. He's blocked by his own pawn, right? Rook sacrifices itself, but Irene is infiltrating with her own queen, and out of nowhere, it seemed like white was about to launch an attack. It is black solidifying the 7th rank, queen threatening an infiltration, and ending the game with f4. And the other rook becomes a... Was that the same rook, by the way? No. The other rook had to get sacrificed. I completely forgot. But in this game, and white resigns here. White just completely resigns. Why? Well, for example, if you play rook takes e4, check, king comes out to e2, F3, I mean, I don't know, everything wins. Not to mention that we have another rook here. So Irene starts this event with 2 wins, huge wins, like seemingly effortless. Maybe the first one took some effort, maybe. Okay, maybe the first one. Here, it was like she just stayed solid. She had a good game plan. And the second that white got aggressive, she was like, nope, rook is trapped and the second rook punished. And Irene starts 2-0. Okay, that's obviously a bad sign. Let's look to our gentleman from Qatar, right? Yes. Hussein Aziz, and this is what I love about this tournament, super international tournament. We have Jansai Abdulmalik from Kazakhstan, grandmaster in her own right, and we see an opening that we saw in which game? Yes, very good. Vidit Gujarati, Nils Grandelius, if you've been watching my Tata Steel recaps, but d5 is played to prevent white from going e4. Now, we have a very obscure opening in this game where black just completely surrenders the center, and now white has to defend the center with moves like knight b3. Jansaya plays a5, and white actually is a lot better here after bishop e3, apparently. Computer loves the position for white, loves the center space. It's saying it's already like +1. But I think not bishop e2. Yeah. Apparently white has to go here. This is the key move. Maybe this is theory, I don't know, but basically you just play this absurd move. You disallow c5 by black, and you pressure b7, making it difficult to develop that side. For example, if knight d7, you have queen c2 moves. I mean, you have to know this before the game, because white plays a natural move and then plays knight c5, but now Jansaya takes in the middle and she's getting more active. But knight g5, threatening to jump in here and fork stuff. She brings the queen out to d5 to cover that. Now white plays f3. Takes. But if we do the math, didn't black already take a pawn? Black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So black is a pawn up. White is getting very aggressive here early on. A move like rook c1, sacrificing a second pawn as possible, and then just castling. Like apparently just like nothing happened. Just castle, I'm down 2 pawns, black to move. You know what the top engine move here is for black? Knight d5. Just not even moving anything, just trying to attack this bishop. And if the bishop goes back here, to just glue the knight into the middle, I mean, it's absurd. I don't know what the machine wants here. It's a very difficult position. But Hussein trades queens. And it's okay, because he's still able to apply some pressure on the queen side with the rook on a1. But now black is going to begin kind of liquidating the pressure. So now bishop h6 is an annoying move. White can castle. He chooses king d2, which is a pretty wild solution to his problems. Pawn c6 kind of blockades everything, and black is ready to kind of begin the untangling process. Plays knight d5, takes, and now the knight comes back to f3. So his idea here is, okay, I'm a pawn down, but that could be weak. That could be weak. I can double up. Maybe I can create a kingside attack. I don't know. That could be weak, right? So now Jansaya has to defend. So what does she do? She defends by attacking. She doesn't defend at all. Instead, she says, excuse me, Mr. Aziz, how are you going to defend your d-pawn? He says, by counterattacking your rook, obviously. So now you have to get out, because if you take, I just take your rook. And here Jansaya puts on her gangster hat, much like Eric Rosen, and just gives him the rook. What? She just gives the man the rook. Okay, takes. Knight takes d4. Now, of course, if he had played like this, he would have lost more material, because too much is at stake, right? So he has to take like this, knight d4. So now Jansaya has sacrificed in exchange for a pawn. She has a bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. 5 is 5, but not in chess. So knight to e5, whose pieces are better? By the way, if you're looking, that is absolutely a free pawn. I actually have no idea why it wasn't taken. Maybe she didn't like rook d3. Maybe she didn't like something here. So instead of doing that, she prevents rook d3. She's like, who needs this pawn? This pawn's an idiot. I don't want it. And now rook c3 to try to take the c file. Rook a6, allowing the infiltration on the c file to counterattack down the middle. So here, rook a4. He saw rook a4. He just didn't like it. Well, he did, because he played it. Knight to e6 back. h4. Now you can't take my pawn. She's like, I never wanted your pawn in the first place, Aziz. All right, Hussein, I apologize. Hussein, Aziz. And are names in Qatar done like first and last? You know, like Chinese names? When you see a name, sometimes they put the first name first. You get what I'm saying. Sometimes names from China, from India, they're flipped, as we say, or not flipped, or etc. Anyway, I'm going to call him Hussein because it's in that order. She plays b5. She's like, Hussein, I don't even want your h-pawn anyway. I want my knight active in the middle. My knight and my bishop work super well together, which is an example of 5 is not equal to 5. So you're really going to tell me this rook is a 5-point rook? Come on, shut up. That rook is worth 4 at most, more like 3.75. This knight is worth 3.5. This knight's a good knight. It's not a bad knight. Problem for that knight is it's about to be turned very quickly into a target, right? So you have to defend it. Now we have to move the rook, and we lose the pawn on b3. King d1, rook f6. Zhansaya plays bishop g4, and actually something very funny happens here. So she decides to protect her king with king f8. She decides to guard against any check there. Knight takes a5. And while white is picking up the pawns and offering a trade of knights, Zhansaya has forced mate in 9 here. She misses it because it's, you're not going to see a 9-move sequence. Maybe she also had low time. But knight d2 check is winning for black, which by itself is not that hard to see, just a check. But this is why it's winning. If the king goes up, you check it, and then you glue the bishop in. And now the rook, the knight, and the bishop have surrounded the king in the dark alleys of his castle. And they say, you owe us money. And also, you are not going to be the ruler of this region anymore. We're going to beat the crap out of you, and then we're going to hold you ransom, right? So look at this. I mean, you got like the pieces just over here. This king is surrounded by the whole army. That is like the worst thing that can happen. And if knight d2, well, she played rook a6 in the game, but if knight d2 and the king goes to g1, there is this little process here to extract the king, and you have to just play a calm move. So, for example, it's very natural here as a human to just see a draw, but she has to just place a calm move, and that's it. The king dies. Crazy. So knight d2, she misses it. She instead plays rook a6, which pins the knight to the rook, and still will lead to a position where now she has 2 pieces for the rook, and she's winning. She's winning. She brings back the pieces, and they're still going to swarm, and they do swarm, but ultimately this game actually has to be decided by some future blunders of white, and Zhansaya has the d-pawn, which is ultimately the deciding factor. She's not going to create a mating net with rook, knight, and bishop, but she is going to get the following sequence: d2 check, rook e1, and mate. On the board, he's a good sport. He plays it out. By the way, you guys might be wondering, when are the men going to win in this recap? Maybe in the next game. Maybe in the next game. So far, they have been getting obliterated. Now, Mr. Bellasena, you know what I call Bilal? I call him, I say he looks like Logic, the rapper. Go look up Bilal, who's from Algeria, is a grandmaster. I'm telling you, in some photos, this dude looks like Logic. Like, I thought it was the same person. His opponent is Gunay Mamadzada. She's from Azerbaijan. She's 20, 21, very strong. I think she has some GM norms. This game was funny. So this game was a chef's kiss, the Najdorf Sicilian. But a sideline of the Najdorf Sicilian, white goes for a very early queen d3. I can't say I understand this move. Sometimes when the queen comes out, it rotates over. The other idea in the Najdorf is obviously this d5 square. So if one side can win the battle for the d5 square or around it, that side is most likely going to win. So we have bishop d2 and knight d5. So we have the first kind of wave of battle for the d5 square. Black chooses to trade the light squared bishop, and now we have a5 looking for a4, and we have a4 preventing a4. Okay, so now what? There are many game plans here, right? One pawn game plan is for white to play f4. White can play this now, and that can either lead to maybe even something like f5, g4, g5. That's another thing, but this is a little bit too risky and frankly far-fetched because black will play something like e4. But f4 is an idea. It's a pawn lever. It's an interesting idea. The other idea is you can play for c4. Oh, sorry. You can play for c4, so you can do this. The problem with this, the b4 square, maybe the c5 square, and it's not clear if you've actually succeeded in doing something or damaged your structure beyond repair. But then there's also piece play. We have to figure out what we're doing with this knight because it's not going anywhere, right? At some point, we'll need to reroute it. Maybe we trade it for this knight, maybe not. Maybe we rotate this rook over in the future. Rook a3, rook comes over. I don't know. Maybe we play pawn c3. Let's let the players figure it out. Okay, so we're targeting this pawn on b6. We play c3 to prevent knight b4. Rook d1 to defend our d-pawn. Fine, fine. Bishop f3. Okay, looks like white should be very happy here. Now, what does white play here? Bilal plays a very nice move. Bilal plays g4. Positional genius. And his idea is that, obviously, if the knight were there, he would be playing for g5. This is a very restricting pawn, and he can put the knight there as well in the future, maybe even take some more space. And you say, well, this is very easy. Black just plays f6. No, because if black plays f6, black gets killed. I was like, well, it's very easy, Gotham. Black just plays f5. Yeah, and then I almost saw you. And this has only improved the position for white. Hello? Hello? King h1? Hello? Right? This is not good. So g4 is a great move. Beautiful positional understanding. And now after queen c8, the knight comes back to d2. Bilal is playing a fantastic game. He now brings the knight to c4, targeting the weak pawn on b6. Black plays knight a6, king to h1, preparing rook g1. He's playing a great game so far, but it's a Sicilian. You can play 15 great moves, and then you can take your foot off the gas and everything goes wrong. So right around this point, the players began a bit of a delicate dance of pieces. Like, there are no pawn moves for 10 moves. So, white attacks d6. Black defends d6. White plays knight to a3, looking for knight to b5. Black doesn't really mind that and instead goes to target both pawns and reinforce the center. We have rook to d4, hitting the pawns, maybe preparing b4 in the future. Queen to d7, multi-purpose move, and the rook opens to target the queen. We have rook g1 defending g4. Queen goes back to b7, targeting d5, right? So now queen back to d1, protecting d5. Knight to h7, looking to instigate on the dark squares. So white plays bishop back to g3, anticipating this, and black decides to change plans and reinforce this before moving the bishop. So we have rook to c4, moving the bishop out of the way and targeting the c-file. Right, so white here is taking over the initiative. We have a fake repetition of moves, don't mind that. Knight back to f8, knight to e3, and at some point, yes, b4. There it is. Bilal is going to take over the initiative. He's going for it. So we have knight back to d7. White needs to continue on with moves like queen b3, rook c6. There it is. Rook takes c4. Bishop c4, I don't love. I like knight c4 going for something here. He must have not liked queen d5, but then rook d1. But then he must have not liked queen a8, maybe. Maybe he didn't like something like this. But, you know, folks, Bilal has played about 20, maybe 25 really good moves, but it's a Sicilian. You put in a little bit too much salt, the kitchen explodes. I don't actually think that's what happens when you cook, but now, queen c7. And all of a sudden, despite Bilal taking back on c4 and seemingly having everything under control, everything is not under control because here come the black knights. And somehow, it is black who turns the initiative onto white. Bishop back to e2, bishop g5. Pawn takes, knight goes to g2, but this is already, you can sense something is going in the wrong direction. Knight d7, the other knight goes to e5, and then knight goes to d3. And it's like, wait, well, I don't understand. Why can't you do this? Yes, but there is this move. The knights now swarm the white position. Knight to a6. Look at these knights dancing. The bishop comes back on f6, queen d2, and now the queen side begins to fall apart. Oh my goodness, what happened? We take on a5, the rook is under pressure, queen comes into a2. The rook on b1 has nowhere to go, so the rook just flies out of there. But that king that we moved over is all of a sudden being attacked, and the game is lost. Bilal resigns, and he resigned because, like, it's not very clear. Well, there's queen f1. But let's say you play rook back to b1. Let me just show you how this would end. Check. King h2. Check. Doesn't matter. You can block. You just get mated. I mean, you just straight up are getting mated. So queen takes f2, and he resigns. And ladies and gentlemen, after 20 games, back-to-back rounds, the ladies have won 6.5 to 3.5. In the first round, it was 4-1. In decisive games for the ladies. In the second round, 3-0. 3-0. The women have gone off to a dominant start. 7-1 in decisive games. Shout out to Brazil. Oh, I'm so sorry. Is it too soon? I have to make that joke. Brazilians, you know I got a lot of love for you. I just interviewed Krikor on my podcast. Please don't hate me. And folks, if you want me to continue the recaps of Battle of the Sexes, please let me know. I absolutely will do it. It's a fun event. And for now, it seems that the women have the men's number, particularly at this ELO group.